Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rosen Pereiras. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the Quad foreign ministers meet in Australia and what's wrong with the Quad, what needs to be done to further strengthen it. Joining me on the program today are Manjeev Puri, former ambassador, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, foreign editor of the Hindustan Times, and Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. From a geopolitical point of view, what are really the challenges as far as the Quad is concerned?
I think the fundamental challenge during this second incarnation of four countries coming together, having four foreign ministers dialogues and going to have the third leaders summit, is unison. There is no clear unity when it comes to what is their vision and where they wish to take Quad, in achieving what objectives. In their first online leaders summit in March last year, they had promised about 1.3 billion jabs, doses of vaccines to be distributed around the Indo-Pacific littoral. In the yesterday's meeting of foreign ministers, they are saying about 500 million have been distributed, and now the word being used is distribution around the world, not around Indo-Pacific. And as mention was made, each country apparently is pulling its own kind of tune into these meetings. For example, Antony Blinken was interested to bring the focus on Ukraine crisis. Japan was perhaps wanting to focus on North Korea. Host Australia would like to see that there are minimum variations in the joint statement and, of course, in the press conference. India was happy to see mention of language that alludes to China and Pakistan and Myanmar and Afghanistan. So what is the common united vision of the Quad for Indo-Pacific? What is the united vision that they have? And what are actionable, 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and with deadlines as they wish to achieve on, the ensuring, as we underline, that indirectly it is all meant to keep certain restraint on China, rule of law, fair play, etc., etc. Look at China's engagement with this whole littoral, and look at these four countries united. Individually, they may be connected. United connectivity or initiatives in securing, keeping open, inclusive, prosperous, etc. Indo-Pacific region. So creating a narrative of Indo-Pacific geopolitics is fine, and they have moved forward in saying that we need to look at Indian Ocean and Pacific Oceans now in unison, in confluence. But what they want to do with that confluence is, even the geographical divisions are not yet clear. Even the nomenclature, we still don't know whether it is to be called a grouping or to be called a framework or to be called a dialogue. What is Quad? In that sense of clarity on what it is, clarity on where they want to go, and unison in their voice and focus. And the United States is, of course, in that sense, engaged in the entire world in various crises. But when it comes to sit in Quad meetings, does it still want to push agenda for Ukraine, or is it something that we need to now, as Indian Foreign Minister said, focus on geographies? We are talking of Indo-Pacific here. So there is a sense of half glass full, not that they have not achieved anything. They have kind of outlined about a dozen plus sectors, mostly in development sectors and non-traditional security sectors where they want to work together. But mostly, if you allow me to use a blunt language, joint statement is a wish list. And we need to see action happening on the ground. We need to see timelines and deadlines and what is it they want to do, especially if they wish to put restraint on China. If they want to just keep it as a talking shop, fantastic.
Absolutely. Very valid points there made. I'm going to take those points forward with the other panelists as well. Let me bring in another aspect now, Professor, and let's take that forward. Individually, on a bilateral level, all of these countries get along very well with each other. They are strategic partners. They have a robust relationship. But somehow when it comes to the Quad, when it comes to this particular plurilateral, they don't seem to be getting everything in order and moving with the best foot forward. Why is that so?
I think very clearly, if you heard Foreign Minister talking to the press yesterday, He said three things define Quad. One is robust bilateral relations that you just underlined, strategic convergence, and shared values. And he meant democracy basically. And that is the strength of these four countries coming together. But everybody understands what brings them together is their concern on China's rising footprint in the region. China is not just the largest trading partner and in very many cases investor in most of the littoral countries of both Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, so Indo-Pacific, but even these four countries. So even these four countries have enormous amount of trade and investment and technology transfers with Chinese. Look at your e-commerce in India, startups in India. So to me, that is what triggered them coming together, that they want to ensure certain socialization or certain restraint on China on so-called fair play and rules of law that mostly Western world has evolved since Second World War. Now, I don't think they came together to sort of work together in AI or big data or technology, green technology or blue technologies. So that is an outcome of their coming together. The trigger for their coming together is China. And on China itself, look at all four meetings of foreign ministers and look at the statements they have made at end of those meetings. Invariably, United States is pushing much harsher line on China, particularly in Mike Pompeo's speeches. If you remember, he wanted to distinguish between the Communist Party of China and Chinese people, and then they are two different entities in that sense for him. That kind of tone has not gone away. Joe Biden's policies, particularly on China, are same as Donald Trump's policies. Then you look at India on the other extreme, where India wants to keep also a finger in the pie of Russia, China. India wants to sustain that cooperation and relationship. China is today the largest trading partner of India, largest supplier of imports. And likewise, Australia to some extent may be a little tough once in a while, but also very, very reticent. And, they immediately resign to the fate when they face wolf warriors. Japan again has a dispute like India, boundary dispute. Japan is also often seen much cautious. So even on the core driver that brings them together, they have continuously had variations in their visions, which are publicly shared with press conferences at end of each of these four meetings. I'm sure differences are much starker when they are in closed door meetings, sitting together and talking to what they can and cannot say. And then, of course, this whole talk about Quad plus, what it means. I mean, it is an open house for anybody to come in and go, unless they show certain vision that they have, which demarcates them as a particular entity together. I don't think it makes any sense. Otherwise, they could have their technology transfers and cooperation at bilateral level as well, or in several other forums. I mean, go to WTO and other forums where you can negotiate technology transfers and do other things. The purpose here is not climate change protection, terrorism, or other things like infrastructure building, capacity building. Which these are issues which have been cropped up, and the sting, as I think Mr. Puri was saying, has been removed. It has gone to AUKUS. So what was it that Quad wanted to ultimately achieve and do together? To restrain China, to bring China to certain, rule of law, order, norms, etc., socialize China, etc. On that front, it appears, and that's why Chinese very often keep saying this is a group of four countries that don't see eye to eye with each other. Are these countries able to do things in Indo-Pacific or outline their vision about Indo-Pacific, which makes China look less attractive to the littoral nations? I don't think that is happening, because China is constantly expanding its footprint in terms of its investments, trade, technology transfers, infrastructure building, and so on. Of course, there are several hiccups in those projects. All projects, even the best friends doing projects with each other. Look at China-Pakistan corridor is a great example of two friends raising 15,000 soldiers to protect those investments of Chinese. So, projects will always have hiccups. But the scale and speed is what you need to notice. Is Quad doing something to either match up to that speed or streamline that speed in a certain direction where they keep talking of quality control, rule, regulations, these things, but are they delivering on the ground? I think we want to now see them coming out with action plans, coming out with certain projects, putting deadlines. This is what they're doing. What is a meeting? A meeting has to be of stock taking. What is the stock taking? What they're telling, what they have achieved so far. They're only saying they want to do this, they wish things would be like this and that. This talk about constant protection of sovereignty, observation of rules. These things beyond a point begin to look like lip service. And therefore, I think if Quad, the kind of ambitious project they have in front of them of stopping the juggernaut of China's economic investments and engagements in the region, there is stronger expectation than helping Tonga in crisis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Points very well taken, Professor. All right. Yes, absolutely. All right, time to get quick closing comments now with the best way forward.
Thank you, Frank. I think, as Ambassador Puri just mentioned, these are four very powerful economies, powerful democracies, powerful militaries. So expectations from them are obviously very different. So, instead of emphasizing on robust bilateral relations, they have to now begin to look at themselves as a minilateral, driven by a certain, objective in certain, urgency of what they want to attend to and achieve. And in that sense, what the Indian foreign minister said very clearly, it is a grouping which is aimed to doing something together, not against somebody. So in that sense, I think particularly United States should stop treating it as a platform to sort of criticize China or sort of do name calling on China, and look at what can be achieved together. Because once that shrill kind of American tone comes into these deliberations, this clearly makes these middle powers far more reluctant about joining that chorus. And that is what Beijing keeps telling us, that these are dispirited countries. They don't have any unison among themselves. So America must realize this is not a platform to sort of follow anti-China tone. Here they have to be far more optimistic, positive, proactive in terms of what they wish to achieve together. And four of them have enormous credibility in the region, and Littoral would definitely engage them in a very, very different way than they engage China, which offers huge turnkey projects with all kinds of debt traps and other issues. They have credibility. They need to work as a minilateral rather than a combination of bilaterals. And I think that kind of evolution is something that is urgent and important, I think. And that is which will make them really far more, draw your line longer rather than trying to deal with the Chinese line, rubbing that off or cleaning it. Once they begin to move forward together in being one minilateral, unity is very, very clear and visible in their statements and action plans. It will be easier because most of the countries in the littoral, as I keep saying, would engage these Quad much better. They can have other friends and allies coming together, going out and doing other things in various specific sectors. But are these four countries standing for something clearly defined as their vision for Indo-Pacific, and how they wish to ensure that security, prosperity, and openness and fair play in the Indo-Pacific? And that has to be really outlined in one voice. And I think that is what is the need of the hour.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us.